Yes, I can, suddenly, yes, I can. Gee, I'm afraid to go on has turned into, yes, I can. Take a look, what do you see? 133 pounds of confidence in me. Got the feeling I can do anything, yes, I can. Something that sings in my blood is telling me, yes, I can. I was just born today, I can go all the way, yes, I can. 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 Hey, yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can!
Are you ready? I can climb Everest. Yes, I can. I can fight here all night and never rest. Yes, I can. I was just born today. I can go all the way. Yes, I can.
Carol, you go in the middle.
I'll go in the middle, okay.
Brilliant. Caroline, I'd like you to kick us off. Tell us why disability is the issue that you are campaigning around and why you think it's something that we need to do more about and more to recognise.
Well, I just want to completely just say that Jude talked about human rights, and I think she made another term, human joy. And that's what that video is to me. And I believe the issue of disability, the 1 billion people in the world who have a disability, which touches every single person in some form of our lifetime. It's personal to me. I'm registered blind. You wouldn't think it with my heels as I ran on the stage. But I only discovered I was registered blind at the age of 17 because my parents hid it from me, not wanting me to have a label. I am obsessed with the fact that 1 billion people is a market. It's a market size of 8 trillion, the size of China. But the exclusion of people with disabilities is still an enormous issue. You're 50% more likely to experience poverty, 50% less likely to have a job, and why? We are consumers, we are your talent, we are your suppliers, we are members of the community. Disability is not a charity issue, it's a human issue and a fantastic brand and leadership opportunity for business. Over to you.
Well, a good opportunity to introduce you, Dan. Obviously, we've seen the work, and Channel 4 has done a great deal on this topic to great acclaim. I'd love to understand why. What was the motivator for Channel 4 to do this?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having us all. Can I just start, though, by saying that Caroline Casey here is known to me as the 8th wonder of the world. She is a really, really extraordinary woman, and this campaign that she's got to revolutionise the employment of disabled people worldwide is an amazing goal. She's going to be successful in it because I do believe that we are on the brink of an absolute revolution in this particular area of life. I mean, for Channel 4, we're a public service broadcaster in the UK, commercially funded. Diversity has always been part of what Channel 4 is about. We've always championed it. We've always championed minorities. We've always understood that doing that inside our organisation makes us more innovative, makes us more creative, and that in turn makes us more commercially successful. And some of the biggest moments in terms of our impact, both in terms of our success but also our social impact as a company, have had some form of diversity at their heart. And I think the Paralympic Games is the biggest example of that. I mean, we exist also obviously as an employer, and that is an area where we have been putting a considerable amount of effort as an organisation, the employment of disabled people. I mean, I'll tell a story that I told Caroline when I first met her, and we collect a lot of data about the diversity of our workforce. Before 2012, 3% of our workforce was disclosing as disabled, and I think probably the most powerful thing that anyone has ever said to me on this subject was what Paul Farmer, who runs Mind, which is the mental health charity, said to me. He said, there are many more disabled people in your company than you think that there are. And I thought, Christ, that is quite a powerful statement. So I thought, well, we'll try and do something about it. So we ran a big campaign trying to get disclosure of disabled people onto our diversity database. We did that through a series of films in which disabled members of staff, some senior, some junior, some who were visibly disabled, some who were effectively coming out about their disability for the first time. And in 24 hours, the number of people disclosing in the company as disabled went from 3% to 11%. And that had a very, very, very profound impact on the culture of the company. So that's almost 10% of the organisation have been suppressing an aspect of their identity. They were still performing extraordinarily competently, and in some instances, many instances, brilliantly as members of Channel 4, but they were doing that with the stress of having to keep their disability secret. I mean, now they don't have that stress, and they're receiving support, and they're receiving help making adjustments. So they are now, excuse me, even I get incredibly passionate and sometimes speechless about this subject. They are now some of the most high-performing members of our team, and they also bring a different perspective, as exists and has been said on this stage this morning, around diversity generally. They bring a perspective which adds to the creativity and innovation of the company. And to be honest, you know, I cannot commend this agenda to you highly enough. Not as charity work. This is a thing which I find frustrating. This is not a CSR subject, okay? This is make your business more successful work.
So Dan's made the case for why this is a business issue, and it's quite clear Channel 4 has been absolutely at the vanguard of this for some years now. Yeah. Why is it a business issue from your point of view?
What do you want to see happen? I actually think it's the new megatrend.
Okay.
And the population figures stand for that, because the 1 billion people in the world who have a disability, 80% acquire between the ages of 18 and 64. That could be any of you. And that's workforce, okay? So the issue of retaining somebody if they acquire a disability. But the other issue, each person, I hope, in their life has at least 2 people that love them. So that is affecting 45% of our population, even as consumers. I also think around the issue of disability, we have framed it traditionally in the terms of charity and sympathy. And I hid my disability when I found out I was registered blind at 17. I hid it for 11 years and got into a management consultancy firm, Accenture, and they didn't even cop it, because I was so scared that if I talked about my disability, then I would be left aside. And can I just say, I'm not a bad employee to have. So I just think there is an amazing opportunity when you focus on the potential and value everybody brings. To Dan's point, every single one of us wants to belong and to be included as who we are. That is not a disability conversation. If you swap out my sight for cancer, for your sexuality, for your preferences, for red hair, the allies in this are the consumers of the next generation, who we have heard from this morning will hold companies accountable. They will hold the companies accountable for those who conscientiously include right across their supply chain. I think the greatest opportunity, I'm ranting now, but the greatest opportunity that exists is for you leaders out there. There's a lot of clutter around social issues. There's 1 billion people here right now. It's an opportunity for brand differentiation, attraction and retention of talent, access to a new market and culture. And my biggest challenge is, where are the Sheryl Sandbergs? Because this needs leadership. This issue of disability has been the poor cousin of everything, not anymore, because now we're getting leaders. I want this Mainstage Davos next year to make sure this stays right on that business leadership agenda where it should be. Also, leaders experience disability.
So we kicked off today with the announcement that One Young World is coming to London, and you've been a One Young World counsellor for some years, and you've had some Mainstage moments there. I'm thinking back to Bogota. We saw the film which you featured in, and you stood up and put a call out to business leaders. You said, we need the Sheryl Sandbergs, we need the Paul Pullmans.
Yeah. No, I had been absolutely told not to do that.
Just relay that kind of
so Dan came with me to
30
Bogota.
minutes.
Dan came with me to Bogota because Channel 4 are genuinely one of the best organisations in the world, externally and internally, around disability. And he's a leader, and he's also a marketing officer. He's not a diversity and inclusion person. So I had the power of Dan Brooke with me. So when we're on the stage, I had travelled from Cartagena on a horse, okay? I'm not a horse rider, I'm a visually impaired horse rider, which is 1,200 kilometres, but Kate Robertson told me if I was going to take Mainstage in Bogota, I wasn't to be boring. So I arrived on a horse. But the great thing is we got 810 million people speaking about this before we landed on the main stage. And I knew there were leaders in the room, okay? And I was told categorically, because Cher was coming on after me, you're not to do this. But you don't tell a campaigner not to do something. So we stood on the stage and we made our call to action for 500 companies to put disability on their board agenda and to get Mainstage Davos. And I said, where are the leaders? Disability is not an inspiring topic. We should never be defined by a medical condition. We are not freaks or somebody to feel sorry for. We're actually a fabulous resource. And bold as brass, I stood on the edge of that stage as Kate and Robert, who are our partners, by the way, tried to nearly get me off and said, where are you leaders? The biggest moment of my life, and I will tell you, 12 leaders stood, but Paul Pullman stood on that stage, and now he is trying to lead the leaders that will sit with us in Davos. So I really believe in bravery, courageousness, a little bit of dangerous dreaming, and having great partners in crime. And I have to acknowledge Seven Hills and One Young World for being the wind beneath our wings. So please, because this is leadership too, it's not just us, it's these guys as well.
Yeah.
Dan, I'd just like to return to Channel 4 in the short time we have left. Obviously, you set along this path some years before the Paralympics. That was a breakthrough moment culturally. I think it was clear to all that something really significant happened, and it was the most successful Paralympics ever. In the years since, what would you say has been, you've touched on business performance, but have you seen other organisations start to turn their attention to this as something?
Yes, I have, and this is one of the reasons why I say that I believe that we are on the brink of a genuine global revolution. And I mean, in my neck of the world, I'd tell you a story that illustrates it. So in London 2012, which was an absolutely transformative event in the world of the Paralympic movement, and they, you know, mostly because of London and mostly because of the athletes, but in part because of our contribution. The International Paralympic Committee did a tour of all of the international broadcasting studios in London 2012, and they came to ours and they said, we've just done that tour, and that yours is the only one with any disabled people in it. Now, that seems absolutely extraordinary when you consider that the reason for all of those people being there was disability sport. But anyway, and half of our presenters were disabled and 10% of the production team were disabled. In Rio, they did the same exercise, and they came to our studio at the end and they said, we've just done the same thing. First thing to say is there's many more international broadcasters covering the event, number one. Number two, every single studio has disabled people in it. And I mean, it was an extraordinary thing for us. It was really like witnessing the world change in front of your eyes. And I think, you know, in that story is the sort of good and bad news, really, I think, because the good news is that the world is changing. The bad news is, I think, for me, the how far we have to go is still, I mean, we're barely in the foothills of this issue. But if we can get it more on the agenda of the board and in business, as Caroline is absolutely tirelessly trying to do, and have examples, and we have several examples of which I've given some today, of how your business can be better as a result of employing and involving disabled people much more in it, then we will create that change.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, Caroline Casey, Dan Brooke, thank you very much.